during these COVID times, the biggest need for business owners to do is pivot. So we created something called the TFA Tuesday Zoom call. In this week's TFA Tuesday, we're speaking with a guy that has every chart imaginable about future economics and current economics. What was the historical performance of real estate? What was the historical performance of jobs and the lack thereof? Logan Mohtashami is going to be overviewing what the future real estate market looks like and how inflation may make a massive difference in the future. I know you're going to enjoy the video that you're about to pay attention to. Hit that subscribe button so that you can be in on all the other stuff that we got going on.
Before I get into the information, I want you guys to know that, my daughter, she's in softball, and, I normally give her the underhanded, and now I'm starting to go overhand with her. I'm starting to do fast pitch with her. I'm not, and she's 11 and she's like 5 guys, so she's kind of tall for her age. I'm not going to hold back on the questions. I'm going to ask them every question that there is with respect to the reports and due diligence of real estate. And I'm actually going to ask him a lot about his personal life as well. Not so much his personal life, but how he grew up, so that you guys have like a good foundation of who's on the call. So I'll get into that in a second, but I want you to know something. He is not just a professional blogger or this, that, and the other. He's actually been with the same lender for decades, you guys. So this is a pretty consistent guy that I have here. This is not loose cannon. He's shooting crap at you. This is somebody that you can actually learn from. So, and Logan, just so you know, a majority of people that are on this call, they're either my agents or my brokers. And we did put some flyers out for publication, but I'm so thankful that you can make it here on a TFA Tuesday, if you will, to learn or to speak with my crew and to answer some of the questions that I have. But to start it off, I know by definition, a recession is not stock market driven. A true recession is based on GDP and 3 other factors, right? So I'm not going to go into recession specifics, but I am going to start off with a pretty predominant question. Take me through, if you could, the historical performance of real estate and say maybe the past 40 years and where you think it's going to be going in the future, just to start off as kind of a broad subject.
Well, if you're looking historically at real estate in terms of prices has typically been rising for many decades right now, outside of the housing bubble years after the crash happened. And when I look at real estate, I look at it adjusting to inflation, and really post 1996, when mortgage rates started to really fall, home prices deviated from inflation growth. So they really started to kick into gear from 1996 all the way up until about 2005, 2006. But what happened during the housing bubble years is that real home prices adjusting to inflation based on the equivalence of rent really took off, and so did demand. And we had a credit bubble for about 3 years. Real home prices were double-digit growth, and existing home sales got all the way up to about 7.26 million. New home sales got all the way up to about over 1 million. And then the credit bubble burst. And then we had the calamity of home prices falling. We had existing home sales fall, new home sales fall, and inventory escalated from 2006 to about 2011. Monthly supply of inventory was above 6 months. And then in 2012, monthly supply got below 6 months, and then home prices started to rise again. And then what happened is that we just had the longest economic expansion ever recorded in history. We had the longest job expansion ever recorded in history. Mortgage rates basically stayed low the entire time. We never even broke above 5% really since 2011. But housing has become this kind of almost like a troll camp about prices. And people always talk about a housing bubble, and people think that home prices are going to crash and everything. And what I've seen in the last 7 years my work is more on the economic academic side of things, but home prices have always had legs as long as supply stays low. And the factors that actually hit supply is demographics and mortgage rates. Those are the primary drivers of what housing demand runs on. And then the big story really in this last expansion, which doesn't still get enough play, is that housing tenure. Tenure means how long people stay in a home. From 1985 to 2007, it was running about 5 years. From post the housing bust years all the way
I'm
to
sorry
here.
to cut you off. I'm sorry to cut you off. You said what years? 1995 to what?
1985 to 2007, the housing tenure was running at 5 years. So basically, turnover was running at 5 years. After the Great Recession, housing tenure got all the way up to 10 years. So people are staying in their homes longer and longer. A lot of that has to do with we've been building bigger and bigger homes for decades, and family sizes have been falling. So a lot of people just don't need to move like they used to decades ago. But this also limits inventory. So if you're talking about prices, the two primary factors, demographics, which is the best right now in the history of America, what I mean by housing demographics is the biggest actually the biggest demographic patch isn't the baby boomers. It's the millennials ages 26 to 32. That's the biggest demographic patch we have in the history of America. The median first-time home buyer is now 33. Mortgage rates are at the lowest levels they've been ever. So you have two factors to help prices. I think this has been the confusing part, is that we just have this massive, massive deflationary, recessionary depression event. And initially, everybody thought, well, home prices have to crash. We have over 43 million people are going to fly jobless claims by the end of this week. Over 30 million people have lost their jobs. They go back to the housing bubble years and they think, well, 8 million people lost their jobs during the housing bubble. Home prices have to crash. Well, purchase application data fell for about 6 weeks. We had year-over-year declines about 35%. And then the only V-shaped recovery that we have in America, really in the world, is the US housing market. Why? Because it falled back down to the main things that drives home prices is demographics and mortgage rates. Once lockdown protocols started to ease up a little bit and people had to take in the data, purchase applications got up all the way and we're back to positive on a year-over-year basis. In the heat months of the data, which is April and May, so you're actually getting positive right in the heat of it. So housing is actually the only data right in the world that has actually recorded a V-shaped recovery already through the purchase application data. Some of the existing home sales and pending home sales is lagging that, but it's holding up. And inventory fell, total inventory fell, monthly supply didn't expand out. Over time, it might rise a little bit if sales lag a little bit. But those are the primary things that drive home prices.
Okay, so Logan, I have to ask you two questions on that. Number one, because I'm taking notes here as well, from 85 to 2007, I can see where they'd stay in their house for 5 years. Could it be during the housing crisis, so to say, you had a lot of people that were getting 2% bailout loans, right? Could it be that they just have to stay in their house for the next 10 years? Because, I mean, yeah, they got a bigger house, but at the same time, they don't want to move. They're paying less than rent.
Well, selling equity was the initial issue. After the housing bubble bursted, we had a lot of people with negative equity. We had a lot of people that, couldn't move, but generally people move when they have kids, when they want to go to a better school, when they have a job or a divorce. These are the primary factors of what people do. Now, when you have, let's say 1975, the median square foot of a home was 1,500. In 2014, the single family home that was being built was 2,700. So we had an escalation of home sizes getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the builders just kept on moving it bigger because they could make more profit off it. But by 2014, what happened is that new home sales weren't growing, and they started to build smaller and smaller homes. And we've seen that in the last 5 years. But the selling equity was the primary issue after the housing bust years, because we have over 140 million units. 37 to 38% of all homes don't even have a mortgage debt on them. But the baby boomers aren't moving, and the people that are buying their first home, it's big enough right now for the family size they have. So housing tenure is also limiting supply to a degree that has to be part of the discussion now and going out for
So if
decades.
I buy a house, let's just say I bought a house, and just so everyone understands this a little bit more in detail, because I remember the 2008 through 2010 craziness. And just so everyone understands, so that I can put it in the right place and perspective. If I bought a house in Eastvale, which I did, by the way, I took a bath in, I ended up short selling. But if I buy a house in Eastvale for $600,000, and I bought it in 2005 or 6, let's say, and now that same house in 2008 and 9 is worth 450, hypothetically speaking. Okay. If it's worth 450, in your mind, you go, why am I paying a $4,000 mortgage every single month, or a $3,800 mortgage every single month? Why not just walk from the property? The bank takes a loss, and I can go buy another property in the next couple of years that's at 500 or 520 at that point, and then, hey, we just start over. But the point that I'm trying to make to you, Logan, and maybe you can shed some light on this, is, again, people were doing modifications at that point, a 2% modification that were lowering their payment, so they're staying in their house. On that note, I'm making notes as I go on because I know that you're fast, bro. So on that note, baby boomers are about 80 million Americans right now. And they, as a matter of fact, when they go and meet their maker, they're going to be leaving property to us. So just something to nibble on. How is that going to affect our property and real estate values? Because just like you said, it creates more supply and less demand, more supply.
It's called a silver tsunami.
Yeah, I like that.
The silver.
Growing on my beard like it.
It's in 2008, in 2008, the first baby boomer hit 62. So there was a conventional wisdom that the baby boomers were all going to sell their homes at some point to create a massive supply push. That was 2008, it's 2020. None of that has happened. Over time, people die, okay? So the distribution of homes going to be passed on to generation, it really depends on, when you look at the demographics of where baby boomers live and where the home prices are, they're spread out everywhere. But the areas where Americans are the youngest, right, that would actually be able to take that supply, California, Utah, Arizona, parts of Texas, parts of New Mexico, and Washington. That is where the biggest, youngest demographic patch in America is right now. So the silver tsunami has been used for many, many years right now as a point to where supply would just hit the market. But if demand can actually take it, it won't be the monthly supply spike that a lot of people have thought about. And just like now, a lot of people thought this recession, you would see a monthly supply spike and foreclosures and everything would start to happen. It hasn't happened yet because mortgage rates are low. The demographic demand is still there. I think the best way for me to explain it is 40 million people don't have a job right now. Majority of them are what we would consider low-wage workers. It's a renter issue right now. Slowly, it will go to the mid to high-level income jobs. But there's 120 million people still working and getting paid. The existing home sales market, the base demand, is roughly 4 million. And then you have about 15 to 20% cash buyers as a percentage of sales. And then after that, if the existing home sales can grow, you grow that 4 million base. So all you need in 2020 is 4 million home buyers out of the 120 million that are working. And we just came off the longest job expansion ever recorded in history. So for right now, the demand is there. Going out in the future, the silver tsunami that's been talked about for 12 years now, I don't believe the velocity of that hitting an entire market will be that detrimental because people are living a little bit longer. They'll pass their homes on to their kids. A job loss recession that will create a foreclosure crisis, that would be a more instant supply hit. And that's something to look about in 2021 because, of course, everybody's doing forbearance right now. But it's a little bit different because, remember, these loans were good. These were all fixed low debt costs against rising wages. It's not like these were 80-10-10 option arm loans or 80-20 fixed interest only loans that were recast in 2 years. So if the job market comes back within the next 12 months to a degree, because we're talking about homeowners, we're not talking about renters, even that supply will be limited because it's much different than what we saw during the credit bubble years, which was only really 3 years during the housing bubble. You take that away, most of the loans were still valid.
Okay, couple things on that. I know you said close to 40 billion. You're right on point. I did my own independent research, and I never knew this, but in 1835 was the last time we had no debt in the country. Is that crazy, bro? But anyways, so we are close to 40 million in the last 9 weeks is unemployment. Housing values are actually up 4%, but from what I understand, actually, hold on, I gotta mute somebody because they're being loud in the background. It was Victoria. Okay, so housing values are actually up 4% nationwide, but from what I've done research on, is it's up because of supply and demand. Peter House auto, it's raising the demand, and the inventory is low. Absolutely, you're right on point from what I've been reading on. But because you talked about something that I'm really curious about right now, and I really want to get your feedback on. You talked about debt, that credit crisis that we went through. But here's the thing that really concerns me. We got a little over 14 trillion with a T in home debt. And here's how it breaks out from what I've researched. Auto debt is over 1.4 trillion. Education debt is over 1.4 trillion. I'm telling my kids, like, dude, you better get a student loan and hopefully you better get real good grades so you can get a grant. And then you got credit cards at 1.1 trillion. And then you have a 10% delinquency inside these credit card rates. And then our lending debt is the short up difference, which is 10 plus trillion. How do you believe that's going to shake out, bro? Do you really believe real estate is going to continue to go north on the values? Even without a 40%, $40 million unemployment rate.
When we look at consumer debt, it is the best debt loan profile we've ever had in U.S. history. And I'm going to explain why. So this is actually one of my talking points I've done over the last 5 years with Wall Street. Majority of consumer debt is mortgage debt. It's roughly 70%. So the bulk of all the consumer debt owned in this country are homeowners. And then when you look at homeowners, what it is that the loan quality now has been so good the last 10 years, really post 2010, is what I call it is you have fixed low debt cost versus rising wages. So when you look at the total debt on the consumer side, then you say, well, what's behind that 70% of that consumer debt is home values. So you have over $16 trillion of equity on top of the consumer debt of homes. So then you go, well, let's look at car debt. Okay, well, car debt, you have what, 7 to 8 million delinquencies out here again, another over $1 trillion. But the majority of car loans that are actually still paying, and it's been the longest economic expansion ever before the virus, the problem loans were always the low FICO scores. Okay, so then we go to housing debt. Well, when you look at the FICO scores, when you break it down with the New York Fed data, it is the best FICO score housing debt market ever recorded in U.S. history. It's actually the best data line we have. So not only do we have fixed low debt costs, no exotic loans in the system, the majority of total debt, whether it's student loan debt or car debt or housing debt, is in the hand of the highest income households with the highest net financial assets. So the job loss recession will create a spike in delinquencies, definitely in the car loans out there, definitely in the credit card loans. But the housing debt itself is going to be a much more solid base. So consumer debt to me was always really good. You have to actually look at it on an aggregate level. We went parabolically bad from 2002 to 2005. Then what we call is debt deleverage. Majority of the bad debt was either lost to foreclosures or short sales. Okay, so then the U.S. debt actually, compared to GDP on a consumer side, it looks better than a lot of other countries because we actually deleveraged our debt. Other countries like Australia, Canada, they still have these high housing debts. We as a nation, if you take the debt versus the debt ratios, because so much is below 4% now, because household debt is tied to mortgages, it's the best debt to income ratios ever recorded in U.S. history, just because mortgage rates are so low. So I'm not actually worried about consumer. The consumer debt is going to get hit because credit card delinquencies, car delinquencies in that side. But in general, when you look at the U.S. economy, we have about 25 trillion of federal debt, of roughly about 15 trillion of consumer debt. We are a $140 trillion GDP financial asset country. So consumer debt, I thought, was the best data line we have. It's actually one of the reasons why we have the longest economic expansion ever in history, because so much of the consumer debt is tied to mortgages. Mortgages, loan profiles were excellent. The debt structures were excellent. And every time rates kept on going lower, people just got better cash flow. And I think that was the story of the last 10 years that never got a lot of play. But I have thousands of charts on this topic. It's actually one of my favorite topics of the last 5 years. Our consumer debt profile was much better than people thought.
Hey, bro, that's the reason why I have the TFA Tuesday, man. See, that's what I'm talking about. That's why I wanted to ask you the question. So terrific. On that note, because you touched upon a subject matter that I've been trying to wrestle my head around, because I'm thinking, damn, how are these people affording this crazy? Here's my question to you is, first of all, first part of the question is, what's the average median household income here in California? Do you know that? Have you ran a graph on that? I know you run a graph on everything, bro.
If you look at household income in California, really above 80,000. That's what it is. And California has a lot of what we call dual household incomes. And I think when people talk about housing affordability in California, you got to remember, every state in the country has a normal housing market, and then there's California. And California is its own kind of beast, but California is really hot near water. Okay, like where I live in Irvine, California, my zip code, I use my zip code as to show how crazy. The median home price in my neighborhood is 1.2 million. Okay, that's just the median home price. If I made it single family homes, it's like 1.8 million. California sales haven't gone anywhere really in 10 years. They've kind of been flat. When rates go up, sales go down. When rates come back down, they haven't gone anywhere. The people that own the homes near water are 200,000-300,000 income households. They have access to stock options. They've done really well. But California gets cheaper every 10 miles going east. That's the real housing market that people should talk about, because when you go near water, or everybody talks about San Francisco, the home buyers in San Francisco are so well off that it doesn't even make sense to compare them with the general population. And I go back to, in 2014, I spoke at the BNY Mellon Stock Conference in Dana Hills. And I told them that 82% of the population in California are priced out of housing once you take away cash buyers and those making 3 times median income. And back then, it was about 176,000. So California is very unique because it's like the US economy. It's a very barbell state. You have these very high income jobs and high income households that own the homes near the water. And then you have everything else which gets cheaper every 10 to 15 miles heading east. And that's the general market out there that, it's the tug and war about mortgage rates and everything. But where I live, and the people that own homes in Irvine, Newport Beach, Corona Del Mar, Santa Monica, Venice, Malibu, that's just a different world, and California has to be separated in that anything near water, those households make so much money, they have so much access to capital, they have so much access to stock options, but the rest of California is normal, and it's not as expensive as it seems, because if it was, there's no way people would be able to afford that. So when you look at dual household incomes, that's the thing that has changed over the decades. men and women working together in one household and providing enough income for that, where low down payment loans could be used to facilitate the debt. But housing in California gets in trouble when mortgage rates get above 4.5%. So on a historical basis, you hear all these people, well, I bought my house in 1982 with 15% mortgage. Nobody cares about that. Your house was like $20,000 or $30,000. Okay. So we've seen this now twice, even with the longest economic expansion in history in the previous cycle. When mortgage rates get above 4.5%, California gets hit first, because the marginal home buyer, not the people that live in kind of these rich coastal areas, they get hit to a degree. So I think that's the one thing that we have to be mindful of, is that 4.5% to 5% mortgage rates, even historically, that looks good. In 2013 and 2014, even in 2018 and 2019, it does hit the market and does impact. So rising mortgage rates, even below 5%, can be impactful for the housing market. And we saw that in the rate of growth of prices, right? In 2019, real home prices went negative. Not a lot of people know that, but on a year-over-year basis, it went negative. I thought that was good. It was healthy for the housing market to get that kind of cool off. And then mortgage rates came back down again, and home prices rate of growth started to accelerate again.
So Logan, Victoria, stop unmuting your phone, girlfriend. All right, so when was the last time we went over 4.5% rates?
So 2 times it's happened in this cycle. In 2013, mortgage rates, the 10-year yield, I always go by the 10-year yield. 10-year yield went from 160 to 3%. When the 10-year yield goes above 2.62% in this country, be mindful that housing tends to get softer. It happened in 2013, and then in 2014, it took a while to get back down. It happened in 2018 as well. When the economy grows, yields rise. When inflation rises, they all go up. In 2018, rates got so high that the builders had a supply shock. Now, the new home sale market is much different than the existing home sales market. So in 2018, monthly supply for new home sales went all the way back up to 1994 levels, which meant that we had an excess supply in the new home sales market, which took the entire year of 2019 to wind down enough to where housing starts ended the year off just flat. And if you look at housing starts on a historical basis, it's still very low, because the new home sales demand is much different. New home sales just had the weakest demand cycle ever recorded in history with low mortgage rates. So that sector, you almost have to separate the new home sales sector from the existing home sales sector. But yeah, in 2018, we saw mortgage rates go up to about 5%. We saw the hit on demand on a marginal side in the existing home sales market, but the new home sales sector took the brunt of the damage.
So 2013 and 2018.
14 and yeah, 2000.
You're saying like
and 14, yeah. 2013 and 14 rates went up.
You believe rates will go up?
I don't think I honestly do not believe we'll see 6% mortgage rates ever, or it'd be very difficult to get mortgage rates even above 5%. I just don't. I've always been a low. I think people that have heard me over the years, I've been trying to convince people that mortgage rates are going to go to 2% for years, and that was very difficult to get people to believe me, because you're always told this. You're always told for 40 years, mortgage rates have to go higher. Mortgage rates have to go higher. Mortgage rates have to go higher. I remember at a conference in 2018, there was a bunch of economists there. Everybody raised their hand. They said mortgage rates have to go higher. And then basically I had to stand up and show a 40-year chart of the 10-year yield. And it has been going down for 4 decades. It has never broken that downtrend one time. So I asked them, why would mortgage rates go higher? The 10-year yield has never broken this downtrend for 4 decades. What makes you think? You were trained and taught for decades that rates have to go higher, but nobody explained why. Annual growth rate is falling for mature economies. Demographics are deflationary. They're not inflationary for old countries. So rates and inflation stay low. So unless we spend like 50 or 60 or 70 trillion dollars short term to just inflate the economy higher, there's no reason mortgage rates should go too much higher, above 5%. We're a mature economy. Even though we have a very big young population growth is falling. It's going to be negative in about 10 years. So that's the biggest factor for housing, is that rates should stay low, but 4.5% to 5% does impact the housing market.
So Logan, you don't think that inflation is happening right now with all this printing of money?
No. And this topic is near and dear to my heart. We have $25 trillion in debt. We are, before this
Oh
crisis,
man, you got to tell me this. You got to explain this to me because I don't know, man. I know why you get controversial now. This is awesome.
So here's a
Tell
thing.
me why.
Federal debt. People have talked about higher federal debt is going to create inflation, even though it has never actually done this. The inflation rate actually grew from 73 to 1980 when oil prices increased. The prime age labor force growth actually kicked in. We had growth and high inflation and Passover. But since 1981, all the way down to 2020, the rate of growth of inflation has fallen. During that time frame, every year, the total federal debt has increased. So these are actually my favorite charts I like to show. So federal debt has increased, the rate of growth of inflation has decreased, the 10-year yield has decreased, mortgage rates have decreased. So we are printing over $5 trillion probably by the end of this year, excess of tax revenues. The rate of growth in inflation right now, core, is below 1.5%. So higher federal debt doesn't create inflation. A good example is Japan. Japan is 250% debt to GDP. Their borrowing rates are negative. They have no inflation. Why? Their population is dying. They cannot create inflation. So when people think higher federal debt is going to create inflation, they believe in currency-induced inflation. They believe that the dollar is going to be weakness. What happened as soon as this crisis hit? The dollar got way strong. In fact, the dollar got too strong that it impacted the world economies because 84% of all debt in the world is denominated in dollars. So no, we have the biggest economy in the world. We have the biggest military. We're a $140 trillion GDP financial asset country. We can print money and not create inflation. That's why inflation has been low. That's why all this printing that we're doing here, no inflation really compared to the rate of growth of federal debt. And you saw this entire cycle. QE, trillions of dollars, federal debt being printed. We never broke over 3% core inflation one time this century. So no, it is a myth. It's a myth about higher federal debt creates inflation. It's not. It hasn't been here for decades. If you go back in the history, higher rates of growth and inflation usually go with population growth. That's why younger countries tend to get inflationary because they're building their economies out. We've built out so much in the last 200 years, and our population growth is slowing. So be very skeptical of the higher federal debt creating higher inflation, creating higher rates. That story has failed for 4 decades. It's the number one thing that I fight on actually at conferences and try to convince, because a lot of people are trained to believe that inflation is going to take off, rates are going to take off, real estate's going to go down. Not been the case.
So Logan, I'm from that school. When I was taught financial planning, it's 4 stages of economics is pretty standard. What goes up must come down. Inflation, you print more money. Obviously, the dollar loses value. It's like a common knowledge in the financial services world, right?
Yes.
So what you're saying goes against the grain in my mind because I'm thinking, alternatively. But I'm open. I'm not a argumenter. I'm actually.
Yeah.
I want to see how it shakes out the next 5-7 years and see if this guy's telling me the truth or. Shoot, it might be economically. I don't know. I might have
the
to.
Baby boomers. The baby boomers messed it up for everyone. They lived during the inflation period of the 70s, so they're petrified of inflation. So they've been talking about inflation rate of growth for 4 decades. It's been falling for 4 decades. Population growth has been falling. Annual growth of GDP has been falling. This is similar to other countries that have population growth falling. It's something that I've tried to untrain people for decades because people don't realize, why is inflation low? Why are rates are low? Why? Because every economist talked about this for many years. This an entire country was based on that if you print more money, your currency will be weak. Our dollar is too strong, right? There's no other country out there that can match the United States of America. China can't do it. Japan can't do it. The Europe can't do it, not even the euro. In fact, the reason why nobody leaves the euro because they do not want to go against the dollar. And so we are the only real true super economic power. It's been king dollar for many years, many decades. And one of the things I've tried to do is try to unteach that baby boomer teaching, because they are so petrified of inflation because they grew up on it and it hasn't happened and they just can't let it go.
Dude, you
And
know
I've got
that
5,000 charts.
Peter Schiff would probably have a heart attack right now.
Yeah, Peter Schiff.
Peter Schiff would probably have a heart attack right now, but the doomsday economists from the left.
The gold bugs are the greatest trolls on the world, and I know half of them. They don't even believe their stuff. They're just giant trolls. They're perma bears. Everything they've said for 4 decades have failed. So be cautious of gold bugs or anti-central bank people. Okay, these are just the natural perma bears for life, and they've talked about inflation and the hyperinflation and gold going to 5,000, 10,000, 100,000. Not a valid thesis.
So, on that note, because I nerd and a half. How old are you, by the way, Logan?
45.
Okay, so I like that, and I'll tell you why. I went to the doctor years ago, and they gave me a prescription. And the doctor was like, nothing against the boomer generation, but he was an older doctor. He had the same old two-step, He was pitching the same old pitch, and he was north of 66, 67. I don't know his exact age, but he gave me a prescription. I went to a 38-year-old doctor, gave me a completely different prescription, and the medicine that is taught is a lot different. So I like to hear this. I like to hear the feedback and the alternative and the charts and the specifics. So I want you to understand something, bro, and everyone else to understand something. I am absolutely wide open to any suggestions, and I'm big on reading into it and kind of listening a little bit more intently. So based on that, Logan, where do you think that we're headed in, let's just say, because real estate's what? Perform 6 to 7%. What's been the performance of real estate historically? Let's say 40 years.
Well, if you annual real estate, you're looking at 4 to 7% appreciation. But it's so spread out in different areas. There's in the Midwest, you don't see much real estate.
Let's say California.
California has had what 6% plus in real estate growth on a historical average. Adjusting to inflation, California has been one of the hottest markets in the world. Why? We have a lot of people and we don't build a lot of homes. That's part of the California issue. We have a lot of what we call hot money, high-end money in an area that doesn't build enough homes. Austin, Texas, for like 3 years built more homes than the state of California did in 2012, 2013, and 2014. So we don't build enough homes in California. We don't build enough affordable homes. We don't build enough market-in homes out here. And the problem is that new homes are very expensive. And I always try to show people the cheapest new home near me was like 1.4 million, for many years. That's like a $75,000 to $10,000 mortgage. So the new homes are just very expensive. So the demand doesn't warrant more building. So California is one of these, again, what I call a barbell economy, is that on both sides of the barbell, it's very heavy. We have a lot of high income people, and then we have a lot of low income. Our structure, how we build homes, is not adequate to the population. So this is why you get home price inflation in California. But again, California has this really one benefit to the middle and eastern, it's Riverside, San Bernardino County. We have a massive young population in California, one of the youngest populations in scale in the world. You take India and China and Africa out of the equation. California actually has a very, very big young replacement buyers. And that's the key for economics, is that you need replacement consumers and you need replacement buyers for housing, or in economics in general. This is one of the reasons why the US has an advantage. We're the only real mature country in the world that actually has a replacement workforce, right? The millennials are about 77 million. The Gen Zs are about 70 million. So we have over 145 million young people that need consumer and service goods. They need shelter, and that's one of the benefits. That's really one of the reasons why my economic work, I said, from 2008 to 2019, housing in terms of net demand, housing construction, new home sales wouldn't have the kind of growth that a lot of people want. But years 2020 to 2024, that's when the biggest demographic patch ever in history of America hits their first-time homebuyer age. And a lot of that still is in California. And you saw that. I mean, here in Orange County, before the virus hit, we had 34% year-over-year growth in sales. People have been talking about home prices collapsing for years. It just doesn't happen. The velocity of supply is sticky, right? Home prices are sticky. They don't really move. The stock market moves up and down. Margin debt moves up and down very, very fluidly. Home prices are much different. It's very sticky. You need more supply. And how you get there is softness in demand. And total inventory fell like to the lowest levels ever. Why? Because people didn't want to sell their homes in a pandemic virus, because you can't, right? For all that period of time, so lockdown protocols, a lot of people couldn't sell their homes. That will change over time, and you just have to track the supply data. That's the key, because the demand base should be there as long as mortgage rates stay low.
Okay. Hey guys, I'm gonna open it up. It's 7:45. We got 15 more minutes, so I want to open it up to some questions that you might have. I had a ton of questions that were ready to go. I'm curious myself when I talk to somebody like this, so I want to get a lot of my answers or my questions answered, if you will. So I do have one question from Ivan, who is one of my brokers out in Chino. He says, what do you think about new construction investment, single family residence or units in Texas, like Houston?
Houston is a good area. Now, because one of the reasons is that the old school Texas used to be so heavy weighted to oil. Oil has collapsed, right? This is the second time oil has collapsed in the last 5 years. But Houston kind of holds itself ground because Texas in itself is is younger, and it gets a lot of people coming in there to move into Texas, not just Austin even. So Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, those are areas that are very affordable compared to California. So Texas also has a very young population. They have a big swath of young population there. So Texas itself holds up very well if you compare it next to California. And we've seen a lot of people move. California still has 40 million people population-wise, but some of the people that moved to Texas from California, the average income is like $77,000. So it's not like, people who can't buy homes move to Texas, and they rent. You got a lot of people leaving with good incomes to Texas because that is where the affordability is, especially compared to California and New York. And the job market is much more diverse there than it was in the 1980s.
Absolutely. Awesome. I also, Texas has no state taxes, so it makes it a lot sexier as well. I do have a question from Shannon, one of our brokers in West Covina. But before I get into that, I do want to ask you, actually, I'll get into my question after Shannon's, because Shannon has a question that is similar along the same lines as mine. She asks, what do you believe the inflation will be in housing in 2021? Meaning, do you see there being a drop in real estate in 2021? Or are you pretty optimistic saying that it's not going to skip a beat? It's going to continue to go north. In California, I'd like to hear two answers, Logan. I'm sorry. What's California, and what do you believe nationwide?
Okay, so one of the things I wrote, there's an article I wrote that I highlight what would you need to see to have home prices really collapse, not only just in California, but nationwide. You don't have any of those things in place. So for California, the rate of growth slowed down when interest rates moved up past 4.5%. So home prices started to accelerate again. Now, the national median price gain is year over year 7.4%, the last report. That is way too hot. You don't want to see anything above 4.6% on a national basis. But as long as mortgage rates stay low, home prices still have legs to go higher. Personally, I would love to see real home prices go negative again like they did last year. And it happened in California, and happened in cities but mortgage rates are now just simply too low. If mortgage rates go to 4.5% or higher, okay, that's where home prices get softer. But getting price declines needs supply. And this is why I fall back to the housing tenure issue. People are just staying in their homes longer, and you just don't get that fluid inventory. So in 2021, everybody needs to focus on the foreclosure market, because after 6 to 12 months, all those forbearance programs will go away. Okay, and they just simply cannot keep on going on forbearance and forbearance and forbearance, because a lot of these loans, fixed low debt costs against wages. If these people got their jobs back, they're not gonna give them forbearance anymore. In fact, the government said that it's considered financial fraud if you're still in forbearance and you still have your job. So focus on the 2021 foreclosure story. See how that plays out, because there's so much economic damage right now that it's naturally a deflationary event. But housing is holding up because inventory refuses to go up higher enough to really bring down home prices. I think the same thing about California and nationwide. You need inventory to increase. So far, it has not happened in California. We might take a longer to sell a home once you get a more fluid market, but we have so much drama right now that you just don't have a normal functioning economy right now. Once you get lockdown protocols all removed, and then we'll start to track the data. This is one thing I've talked about for months. We should look at housing data after July 15th, because the data is so wild these first few months. That's not how housing data should go. After July 14th, we'll have a more normal market, and then we'll see where it takes up. But you follow supply, 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 supply. And once you start to see supply start to really increase, there's where you should be mindful of home prices. But as of now, we've had 99, I think, straight months of home price gains on a national basis. It's because supply refuses to go up higher.
Now, on that note, why July 14th, by the way? I'm just curious.
Okay, so when we had lockdown protocols, this year is really, really funky. Purchase application data was positive, double digit year over year, all the way to March 18th. And then it started to decline on a year over year basis in a very aggressive way, but it stopped going down about 6-7 weeks ago. And every single week it started increase. And last week it went positive. It's the only economic sector in the world that's had a V-shaped recovery in 6-7 weeks. So the existing home sales took a dive, pending home sales are taking a dive. But by July 15th, because purchase application is 30 to 90 days out, the June housing data, which will come in the second half of July, that'll be more realistic of where we are right now. And as long as existing home sales prints above 4.6 million, it's very hard to get price declines. That's why I say wait until July 15th for the June's existing home sales report. A lot of the articles I've written for Housing Wire and for my own blog, it kind of explains why, because then you could get a price sensitive basis, because if sales are back up again, you're just not going to see the inventory people have been talking about caused by this virus.
All right, I got another one. Sorry, bro, I was Snapchatting. I'm gonna tag you on that one. All right, so Marta asked, how will the housing market in Las Vegas be? Well, do you have charts on all this stuff, bro? And I want to put a plug in for you too, because I know that you're still a lender above anything else. You still do lending, but do you run graphs on different cities? And
so I have my Facebook page is open to the public. There's every economic chart you could possibly have, especially tied to housing, is there. It's open to the public. My blog, loganmohtashami.com, is just my name.com, goes over a lot of the housing reports. I write for Housing Wire. I'm a columnist for them as well. There's a lot of charts in there. Las Vegas home prices really moves up and down. Okay. Again, another thing that moves with rates. When rates went up, inventory went up. Now, the thing is that percentage of inventory went up so much that it looks like home prices were going to crash, but they were working from such a low level. And then when mortgage rates started to come back down, Las Vegas data started to get better. So as always, look at your monthly supply for any local city. Typically, when you get about 6 months, pricing switches. It becomes a buyer's market. So even though you see these big percentage increases in Las Vegas during 2018, on a monthly level, they were very low. So I do provide economic charts for all housing data every single month. They're updated, and they're on my Facebook page. Actually, they're open to everybody. And then the blog goes over reports out there. I specifically talk about when the CAR comes out with their reports. We talk about the price increases or price decreases, where it is. But again, inventory. If you want to look at California or look at the inventory levels. There's not a lot of velocity in inventory. Once they skyrocket, boy, it just happens. You see that price decline. So far, nothing out there. And I do show that inventory chart from the CAR that comes out every month.
I'm gonna look that up definitely, bro. So I'll show it, and I'll actually put it on the group because I know that we have a Facebook group, TFA Tuesdays. I don't know if you're a member on there, bro. I try to add you on Facebook, but you too big time for me, bro. I
cut someone off.
I gotta drive down to Irvine. Yes. Yes.
But
all
yeah,
right,
it's Facebook, Instagram.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so home stretch, guys, home stretch. I'm gonna have him, or I'm gonna put it on our TFA Tuesdays, and I'm gonna put this on my YouTube as well. But I wanted to ask you a question myself, because you talked about forbearance, and I know that 75% of housing, this is the research that I did, I might be wrong, but 75% of housing is pretty federally backed. I mean, Ginnie Mae, you got FHA, you got VA, you got Freddie Mac, you got Mac Daddy Manny, you got all the stuff that you could think about with all these federally loaned, federal loan organizations out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with 75% of their money out there, they're giving these 6-month forbearances, and then they're giving another 6-month forbearance. Do you see that having a hit? I mean, I know that we're waiting until July 14th, but what's your prognostication inside of this plan or inside of the market?
I would tell you this. I've known the director of the FHFA for a while. I know a lot of the people that work at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. The United States of America is very lucky that the Freddie and Fannie did not become public companies. They're trying to get them out of conservatorship. A lot of my bullish thought about housing during this crisis was that Freddie and Fannie were still in government conservatorship, which means they have the ability to help homeowners because they could get access to their treasury. If they were a publicly traded company out of conservatorship, all hell would have broken loose this year because they would have tightened credit up so bad that the government would have had to take them back into conservatorship again. But the fact that they were not publicly traded companies that needed $240 billion of capital, it gives them a little bit of leeway to do forbearance plans and move it to the back of the loan. But I think that it's a very libertarian-run government conservatorship. But as long as in an election year, nobody's really going to do anything to rock the boat. So expect forbearance plans to work for those that actually show that they've either lost their job or they lost some sort of income. Everyone else, after a certain point, will be taken off that forbearance plan. That's what the government actually has said recently, that if you cannot show stress or financial distress in your income or job, then they're going to get you off of forbearance. Now, technically, if you still have your job, you should be working. That's the quality of the loans in this cycle. It's the best loan profile. Now, our family has been in banking since the late 1950s. Okay, I'm a third generation here. I can tell you right now, the last 10 years was the best loan profile I'll ever see in my life because they were all fixed loan debt costs against rising wages. So people that have their jobs, they didn't lose any income, should be able to make their payments. Now, some people probably took the forbearance that didn't need it. That'll go away. So in 2021, if the job market comes back a little bit and some people get their jobs back, it should be okay. It's not going to matter, but we will see foreclosures, especially with FHA home buyers that might not have enough selling equity. Outside of that, everyone is good. We have so much nested equity in this cycle. It's the best ever we've ever seen. We didn't have a cash out boom either. In 2002 to 2005, there was a mass cash out boom. We didn't see that any of that action either. So I cannot stress how solid the loan quality in America is going into this crisis. If it was any other time, we'd be in trouble. But the forbearance plan should last for 2020. You need to wait until 2021 to see what happens, especially with the government, who runs the country then, and what the plans are going to because it's just a wild card right now. It's only June 1st, and we still have an election and everything else happening. So a lot of moving parts for 2021, but for 2020, it should be okay.
So to sum it up, the last question I'm going to ask you in a second, but maybe we should have you back, bro. I'm not going to stop these things. I think that either we're going to have it in person or we're going to have it on Zoom, but we're going to have it. I'd love to have you back, and maybe after July 14th, we could have you back to kind of give a little bit more projection. And last question for you, because I've been crushing you, and I know that you want to get back to dinner with your wifey.
You haven't been crushing me.
Election. What do you think? You think it's Trump's year? I bet my buddy Tommy, I hope he's on this Zoom, but we have a gambling debt, or we have a gamble right now on who's going to be president come November. What do you think, man? You think it's going to be Trump? You think it's going to be the Dems? You think it's going to be independent? What do you think?
Here's the thing. I detest politics. I try to keep away from it as much as I can. I always tell people politics is the word itself. Poly-ticks, many blood-sucking parasites. That's how it's spelled. Think of it as that. But when people ask me about elections and what happens, all moves around turnout, right? Okay, so whoever can get the turnout in country is always 45%. It's that 10% SWIFT right there that whoever gets that 10% to come out and vote typically wins. So personally, if the Dems get united, they can take this. The problem is the Democratic Party has a left wing that is just, they're kind of wild. They're a wild card out there. But if they unite together and come out and vote, they can win. But until I'm convinced that happens, I would say Trump would have to win, because I'm not sure if that left wing of that Democratic Party will come out and vote. And remember, we're only talking like 70,000 votes really that changed the election last time. Now it's, it's just a wild card. So much can happen between now until the election, and then especially the 6 weeks after the election. That buckle up, wash your hands, and get ready, because you thought the first 6 months of the year is crazy. It's going to get even wilder than the next 6 months.
So Trump wins. What do you project for 2021?
Well, political economics don't really move any of my economic examples. I believe economics is run around demographics and inflation and productivity. I always say economics is demographics and productivity. The rest is stamp collecting. So I don't ever really change any of my thought process depending on who wins, unless they have some kind of program that actually has enough votes in the Senate to change things. So I don't ever look at politics on any of my forecasts really, except for, if I thought that the Congress was going to change and certain things were going to change. So right now, it's just my view of 2021 would be similar. But again, all that is kids play compared to this virus, right? The virus this is a healthcare crisis more than anything else. You do not have an economy unless you can walk the earth freely. We are a consumer-based economy. We have to be able to go out and buy stuff and go to football games and do things like we already do. That is the most important aspect out there. And there are some steps. My work has changed so much that I do it this way. BC, AD, AB. BC is before coronavirus. I track all the data then to show how good it was before. AD is after the disease. That's how crazy these economic charts. And again, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything. They're open to the public. You can send a request in, especially Instagram stories. I do little videos on every single report every single day. We're still in that AD stage, but once America gets back, once we can walk the earth, things are going to look a lot better. And some of the things we're starting to get there. We're not there yet. I kind of have a 5-base economic model, but we got the curve flattened. That's positive. But again, we got to be able to walk the earth. So, and we got to not have that second wave. So to me, politics is like the very last thing on my mind. getting this healthcare crisis in control is number one.
So just so I understand this, because next year, January, I want to come back to you and be like, man, let's go have a cup of coffee and talk about this. It doesn't matter if Trump's president. It doesn't matter if the Dems take it. It's all going to matter on population and what they do historically.
I do not believe in political economic theory. I'm just the history of economics have been based on population growth, productivity, inflation. Now, again, remember, it's the president is just one branch. Senate, Congress, the House. These things, all these things have to come into play, and something has to get passed for me to even implement anything. This is why I stay away from it. So much of the talk is who's the president, what happens here or there. It's so much of economics is demographics and productivity, and there's a lot of noise out there. But we had the longest economic expansion. We had President Obama, we had President Trump. We had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, all these things. But the demographics of the U.S. Was the biggest reason why we had this record-breaking expansion, and the virus took that away. So I'm not a big believer of political economic theory. Never have been, never will be.
Even then, I mean, not to make this a little bit longer than anticipated, but even then, when Obama took office, the U.S. debt was at 10-something trillion, and when Trump took office, it was at 20 trillion. Today, it's sitting at 25 trillion,
and
once we print some more money out, we're going to be at 20.
Yeah. There's an article I wrote. I said 71 trillion debt by 2060.
I don't see how that stops inflation, Logan. I don't see how you think inflation's not going to run away from that. I'm waiting. I'm excited about that. If it doesn't.
Listen, after this, I'll tag you on Facebook, and I'll show you all the charts to prove that higher federal debt does not create higher inflation. It is a myth that has been propagated. We are not Germany 1923. We're not Zimbabwe. We're 140 trillion GDP. Japan has twice the debt load as we do, and they have no inflation whatsoever for decades. So population growth, inflation is shortages. Right? And when inflation really happens, you have a shortage of a supply of something, and then the price exceeds. The velocity of money is so little, really. I mean, because so much money and income is in the hands of so few people, they can't spend it all, right? So you would need like so much income to go into so many more people to create inflation, because you would not have natural shortages of items. That's what inflation really is. That's why inflation rate of growth, we've had cumulative inflation for decades, but the rate of growth inflation is low, even with all this money printed, even with low rates, because the velocity of money is not strong. And that's why you don't have any inflation. That's why 10-year yield is under 1%. This is why the rate of growth inflation is low. The velocity of money is just not that fast enough, and it doesn't really occur for mature economies. I'll change your mind. Trust me.
So, all right, I'm open. But so explain this to me then. So why not just print some more money off, man? I want to get a Bentley. So why can't they should just give me more money?
We have been pushing for more government spending for stuff out there. Now the thing is that you do not, if you're worried about inflation, you don't want to give everyone $100,000. Right? Because if you give everyone $100,000, that will push supply shortages. Money will go in there. But there's so much more we can do. This has been a really good con for all these years, because federal debt is power, right? If you give so much power to a certain group, votes, right? So everybody sees we're broke. We were broke at 1 trillion. We were broke at 5 trillion. We were broke at 10 trillion. We're broke at 20 trillion. We just printed $9 trillion of federal operations and fiscal stimulus. There's no inflation because the velocity of money isn't there. Now, because we had a deflationary event, the percentages are going to be low, so you're going to see an increase of inflation when you rebound the economy. But if you take that all away, there's nothing. There hasn't been anything since 1996. The rate of growth in inflation has really been below 3%, even with federal debt being out here, even with 0% interest rates, even with QE and everything. The Peter Schiff crew, that gold bug, all those people failed miserably. And they know it because it's a con for them. They know they're lying. They do it for marketing reasons. out there.
Hey, I think the guy's a little bit. Anyway, so
he's a great marketer.
he is.
He's a great marketing guy, but he knows it. He knows he's. And Peter Schiff lives right next to Ricky Martin.
I can't last. I can't go more than 15, 20 minutes with him. His voice just like lingers in my brain too long, bro. So, all right, man. Well, that's all we got. Thank you so much, Logan. I really appreciate you taking the time out and spending time with us. Again, you know, I'd say 60% of the people on the Zoom are my agents or brokers, and we got operations all over the place. We got we got 13 offices, 12 in California. We do everything on the life insurance side and the retirement side. We roll over 401ks. We figure safety out. We do have a stock portfolio. We own a registered investment advisory firm. On that note, to sum things up, how can I earn your business, Logan? I got to be your insurance and retirement planning guy. You're married. I'm sure you got a lot of stuff that you got. If you had 50,
I'm semi-retired.
Talk to me.
So I'm semi-retired. So I'm at 45.
Perfect.
I've kind of done my own thing, and life is good. Can't complain.
That's perfect. So if there was something that could save you thousands of dollars on an annual basis, you'd be interested, right?
Making my wife not buy stuff on First Dibs apps, that'll save me $1,000 a month. Yeah. Take that app away from her.
All right, man. I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna put on the sales hat this week. I'm gonna bang down your door. Irvine's real close to me, so we're gonna do some research, and I'm gonna come up with a graph to come find you. All right, thank you so much, Logan. I appreciate your time, brother. I'll see you guys. Until next time, guys.
Did Logan not do an unbelievable job at describing some factors that may take place? As you can probably tell, I kind of disagreed with him in a couple different areas. I kind of had a difference of opinion in a couple different areas. But just like any great financial strategist, I didn't lean to the right. I didn't lean to the left. I kept it pretty balanced. I know you enjoyed the TFA Tuesday Zoom, so hopefully you'll smash that subscribe button. See you soon.